Hi, this is part 2 of campaign finance reform in the United States, and on this particular video I'm going to concentrate on super PACs and then look at why has the whole issue been so difficult to reform. So super PACs, they differ to PACs in basically three main ways. The first way is that super PACs are not prohibited from accepting funds from trade unions, associations or corporations. Secondly, they are not prohibited from donating money directly to a candidate. And thirdly, they can raise and spend unlimited amounts. So if you take, for example, in the 2012 Republican primaries, Newt Gingrich's super PAC was called Winning Our Future, and Sheldon Adelson and his wife, who are casino owner billionaires, they gave $10 million to Newt Gingrich's campaign. Mitt Romney's super PAC was called Restore Our Future, and again that had large amounts of money donated to it. So that's super PACs, and they were formed largely as a consequence of Citizens United versus the FEC, which I mentioned in my previous video. So why has campaign finance been so difficult to reform? Well, the first main reason is constitutional. It is seen as a clash with the issue of free speech. People being able to freely spend their money how they please, and if they want to do adverts to support people, then they should be able to do so. And this constitutional issue of freedom of speech has led to the Supreme Court watering down campaign finance. So Buckley versus Valeo in 1976 watered down to some extent the FECA legislation, as I mentioned in my previous video. More recently, Citizens United versus the FEC in 2010 watered down aspects of McCain-Feingold. They said things like pressure groups should be able to run adverts when they like, there shouldn't be restrictions on it. And so that's one reason why campaign finance has been hard to change. A second reason is, if you think about it, the very people who benefit from campaign finance and the money they get are those who've been asked to make the changes. So the politicians who gain the money at elections, and therefore the beneficiaries of the system, are the very people who've been asked to introduce restrictions. So John McCain, for example, in 2000, one reason why he introduced his legislation was in 2000 he ran for the Republican nomination to be president, and in the primaries he campaigned on campaign finance, but he was outspent and beaten by George W. Bush. Now, that is one reason why he introduced the legislation 2 years later. He obviously, an issue that was important to him, and he's probably one of the rare examples of a politician who would do that. But again, he was a beneficiary of the system. A third reason for the restriction is loopholes have always been found in the legislation. So if you think about it, the FECA legislation saw soft money contributions that were able to be made. The McCain-Feingold legislation led to the formation of 527 committees to try and get round some of the loopholes, and then also with the super PACs being formed. So at every opportunity, either the Democrat side or the Republican supporters on that side have sought to find some way of getting round the system so they can donate the money which they want to their particular side. So there's some of the reasons why it's been difficult to reform. On the opposing side, those who say, well, the system's fine, why change it? Okay, obviously you've got the constitutional issue, it's an issue of free speech and therefore shouldn't be altered. But also, you could argue that it's actually, unlike Britain, it's seen as a bit of a civic duty to donate money. If you donate money in Britain to a political party, you seen as being a bit odd. Whereas in the United States, there seems to be much more of a culture of donating funds and money to political parties. So there's a bit of a cultural issue regarding this. Second argument sometimes made in favour of the current system is that the amounts spent may appear quite big, and they are, but actually in comparison with other spending it's not that great. The Ashby book, for example, talks about in 1996 in the presidential election, the amount spent in that election was actually less than half that of the amount spent by Americans on perfume and stuff in the same period, so therefore put it into some kind of context. A third argument sometimes made in support of the current system is that wealth doesn't actually lead to an automatic victory by a candidate. So in 2010, for example, Linda McMahon who's a Republican running in Connecticut to be senator, she spent $49.9 million, but she still lost to the Democrats. So money doesn't always lead to victory. So there's some of the arguments about why it's difficult to reform the system, and also a couple on the other side for those who support the system. As I mentioned before, William Storey is quite good on campaign finance. Ashby, his third edition, page 18 to 23, is also quite good, especially on the defence of the system.